What blocks and what facilitates creative expression? In short, many things. But in this video, I will summarize some of my key insights that I have come across in my experience. So let's get into it. First, I would like to talk about a very important distinction: commitment versus perfectionism. Without commitment, we won't get far. When it comes to commitment, I see it similar to such keywords as discipline, as focus, as habit. Commitment to me is recognition that it can take, and often takes, time and effort to build and create something successfully. And most of the time it might even take longer than we expected initially. People often hold unrealistic expectations, including entitlement that they should have it quickly, not acknowledging all the structures that are against their creation, including their own inner resistances and blocks, as well as external ones in forms of conditions, environments, rules. So commitment means overcoming different challenges during creative process. Seeing creativity as habitual practice, in my humble opinion, is very beneficial. If we only perceive creativity as process that is happening when sudden inspiration occurs, then we might wait for quite some time and miss all the opportunities to create until then. While sometimes the thought of I don't feel like creating today might be true for us, and we might need to actually take time off and have a rest, a lot of times it actually blocks us hard from creating and is resistance. So let's expand a little more on commitment. From my experience, I have noticed that there have been times when I did not feel creative inspiration at all. I then started journaling about whatever I was feeling, thinking, and experiencing. And at that moment, suddenly a space opened up for me, and I got insights. And after that, I started to feel an inspiration. And that happened because I took action when I did not feel inspiration, at least on a surface level. And this has taught me that we also need to let the surface level content of our perception out, so we can access the deeper gold nuggets beneath it. I don't mean that the surface level doesn't matter, because it does, because it signals our deeper resistances often. So it's good to pay attention and address whatever comes up in forms of our thoughts and emotions. Let's not be surprised if we have scheduled, for example, to create something, and suddenly some old uncomfortable memories come up, reminding us that we have been holding in past a certain negative belief about ourselves, about our capabilities, about our self-worth. Or maybe we remember a bad dream that also signaled us about some of our fears and doubts about our self-worth. Often fear subsides when we practice doing a thing until it is no more unfamiliar. But if we are continuously challenging ourselves creatively, then new fear might appear again as a signal that we have left our old comfort zone, that we have been in a comfort. In any case, it's normal that our creative process can trigger our childhood traumas that hold certain resistance to expression of ourselves. And over time, it's important to heal these traumas if we want to truly be able to create ourselves authentically and freely. And while that may take time to completely do it, it also helps us if suddenly this resistance comes up, we acknowledge it and we don't run away from it. Usually acknowledgement and awareness allows the inner pain to subside, and we can then work on whatever project we intended previously before the resistance came up. As we can see, commitment means also cumulative effect. We work with a tip of iceberg, which is our surface level thoughts, emotions, feelings, and then suddenly something huge, previously unseen, emerges. And it can also happen that when we work or focus on one thing, but suddenly we get an insight about another thing that might not be even related. We can't always have a 100% high enthusiasm and rely on that. And enthusiasm is a powerful force because it drives us to move forward. So there might be moments when there is enthusiasm at the start, but then gradually it kind of goes down, and that's why we need commitment to finish things through. Or vice versa, there might be also a scenario when we start a new project and at the beginning we don't feel this super high enthusiasm. So at the beginning we need commitment to start this project, and over time, by working more and more on this new project, we then can start to feel more enthusiasm. So we have talked about commitment, and let's talk more about perfectionism. So how to know when there is commitment and when we are slipping into perfectionism. If commitment facilitates, perfectionism kills creativity. Perfectionism creates stress, it repels attraction of what we want to create. Also on an energetic level, because subconsciously we are transmitting an energy that says whatever we are doing is not good enough. And there is something wrong with us too. And instead of coming to us, people unconsciously avoid us because they receive this perfectionist energy that is very repelling. So paradoxically, perfectionism pushes people away. And in my mind, there are at least two types of perfectionism. The first type is when perfectionist has raised so high standards that she doesn't even dare to start trying to reach them, because he or she doesn't believe that it can be done. So perfectionists procrastinate. The second type manifests when perfectionist does excessively more work than needed, because perfectionist is very attached to a certain outcome. And as a result, the final product is way overdone, way overanalyzed, due to immense stress and pressure, and it's less of a quality, to be honest, because perfectionist has lost himself in the process and tried to overcompensate his low self-confidence by simply doing more, thus thinking he's adding more value, when in reality it's opposite of that. Perfectionism is related to a wounded masculine part of us. It can often push away creative ideas and not even recognize them as such. And these creative impulses or ideas are brought forward by our feminine side. We have talked enough about commitment and perfectionism. Let's now talk about another aspect that is very important, and that is limiting the noise. Creativity or creative ability is always there, and we just have to free up space for it to happen naturally. We need to let go of impeding thoughts, ideas, and address feelings and beliefs which create resistance to it and makes it more difficult to express creatively. We often block what wants to come through us because we're scared that we're not good enough, and whatever comes through us, it won't either be good enough. At least that's what we believe in many times. And there is actually no such thing as I am not creative, but there exists such thing as distraction, or in other words, mental clutter that overshadows our potential creative expression that is already there and wants to simply come through us. And distraction is a form of resistance. So it's a good idea to investigate our thoughts, our feelings, and behaviors that prevent us from creating and distracting us. A part or multiple part of us can try to force us to avoid creative process because it is perceived as threat and with potentially bad consequences that might previously happened in childhood. One of things that helps also with distraction is setting boundaries, so we are not scattered all over the place and we don't feel as overwhelmed and as anxious because of it. When there is lack of structure and focus. Another thing related to distraction is too much consumption of digital content. It creates even greater noise in us that is already there. And the noise can create chaos from which all kinds of impulses and stimulus can arise that can negatively impact our creative ability. What is meant by that is if our mind is overstimulated with all kinds of information, including entertainment, it can create inertia from which we can receive impulses that might not create the best results for us. And when our mind is full with information, often with low vibrational junk, I might add, that can certainly bring forward bad ideas and impulses that resonate with the low vibrational junk. So we need to clear our space, clear our energy field from junk information and from junk energy. And one of the things that help us, besides limiting our digital content consumption, is spending time in nature, going on long walks. Because nature helps to become more present, it helps to expand our consciousness and create more space. In nature, the energy is expansive. Instead of in home, it's contracting. The next thing that I want to talk about is being careful with our expectations. So, if we compare ourselves with others, especially those who we regard as higher achievers, then automatically we see ourselves as inferior. And this can lead us totally off our path. Because if we look at others, we often do not look where we're supposed to look, at ourselves. And we might miss opportunities that are for us, according to our own skill and experience at the moment. If we look at someone who has more experience, more skill, and has spent more time, then obviously it is inadequate to compare ourselves with them. It's unreal to expect from ourselves the same type of results, because they have done it more and a lot longer and are probably on another level. That's it. So for us, it's good to be honest and evaluate ourselves. Where are we now? If we don't want to evaluate ourselves where we are right now, then it's like trying to create through our ego, which is always insecure, always feels incomplete, never enough, and trying to always overcompensate, full of stress. So it's really hard to expect an attractive energy from that. Another expectation that might come up for creators is that creative process starts with something special, something very clear, something epic, something grandiose. And if we are only looking for that, then our filter will miss a lot of smaller opportunities and more subtle creative impulses. We will overlook them as insignificant, waiting for something bigger, something more epic. But often bigger comes as a sum of smaller things put together. So neglecting small things and seeing them as separate from the whole bigger process might be a big mistake. Another thing to add in context of expectations is that focusing on end result overshadows the present moment, the process itself, and the quality of action suffers greatly. And if we are fixated upon certain expectation that the process has to end in a specific way, that can certainly block creative impulses that would bring a lot better result in the end. I'm saying that it's a good thing to start with the initial direction because it moves us somewhere. It starts the movement. But at the same time, we have to recognize that often during the process, we adapt our action, and ultimately that can also change our initially set outcome to become something different. That is creative freedom. Otherwise, we might be victims to control and attachment, which means we identify with our own creation, and we don't want to feel bad about our creation, which leads us to stress more about it, and so its quality suffers in the end. Another expectation might be, I should be up there, not down here. Long time ago. So there might appear a tendency to overcompensate for our presumed past failure or inability to achieve results faster back then. Or there might be a desire to compensate now for what we delayed and procrastinated in the past. So now becomes time of increased pressure for what we supposedly did not do before, and we decide to do more now. We gotta be honest with ourselves if beneath such decision is anxiety. If it is, it can burn us out quickly, and our initially started fun project might turn out to misery for us. An energy of statement that would state, I am not good enough now, so I need to produce and deliver a lot more to be more worthy, more valuable. Next thing that I want to briefly talk about is creating by using other people's creative impulses and energy instead of our own. It means that there is a risk when we are not tapping in our own creativity, but we are riding a wave of someone else's creative energy. And if that's the case, it degrades our own potential. And many people unconsciously decide to copy others or build on top of other people's creative vision because they view others as recognized or established authorities in the market, and they view themselves as nobody. So the question is, how authentic is that to the person who is tapping into someone else's work and not his own? We basically become like reporters of someone else's work by not doing our own true work. So we have to be careful how much we are in someone else's information field, how much we are dwelling in someone else's work. It's good to cleanse ourselves, especially from spending quite some time consuming someone else's content, ideas, even if that content is great and we're learning from it. This still might not be ultimately authentically ours, and we want to cleanse away what is not ours and keep what is ours. Otherwise, the person that we are inspired by and we are following too much is going to overshadow our own potential and our own inner resources. And we slowly start to become creative replicas of that person. And we don't want to remain for too long in influence of that person. I'm not saying that we should never spend time getting familiar with other people's work. Of course, people can sometimes inspire us to take action that leads us to create something different for ourselves, and that is fine. Or it can sometimes help us better to formulate what we already were trying to bring forward in structure. One of the things that guides my content creation is to produce it through my own experience and insights that might sometimes also be facilitated through someone else's thought or idea. But it's important that I also come conclusion to my own insights. Otherwise, I am simply reporting someone else's knowledge without testing it in practice. We have to walk our talk too. I just mentioned insight, so I want to close on talking briefly about creating from personal insight instead of pure information. When we receive an insight, it often helps us to structure what has already been accumulated in terms of information in us. And insights help us to integrate it better. Otherwise, we have this information fragmented here and there and drifting in our energy field, but not yet structured and integrated in a meaningful way to us. So basically, what insight does is it enables more powerful practical application of the information or knowledge. This is why I always try to publish based on my personal insights, which is transformative. I believe it's not enough to simply consume information if there does not come an aha moment afterwards consumption or during consumption process. Because aha moment allows it to sink deeper in our consciousness that will be available for us later. And sometimes we may need particular insight to be received repeatedly, so it can sink really deep in us in a very powerful way. But we have to remember that no matter how powerful insight is, insight without action is nothing. That's it for now. What are your thoughts about things that you heard in this video? Did you resonate with some what was said? Did you disagree with something? I invite you to share your experience in comments. As always, I really appreciate your attention, and thank you.